Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Nelson, and I'm going to be talking about the East River in Wisconsin, which you can see on this opening slide. I grew up in this area and am familiar with a lot of the environmental issues faced by rivers in the region, so I chose this project as a way to examine potential solutions to water quality degradation in my hometown. Over the course of this presentation, I will be providing a brief description of the watershed, covering some of the current restoration objectives in the region, and then delving into my project's problem statement, methods, and results. The East River is situated in northeast Wisconsin and flows north for about 42 miles from primarily rural and agricultural lands in the south to the city of Green Bay and its suburbs in the north. The Upper East River sub-watershed, here in yellow, also includes a high concentration of dairy farms and 5 concentrated animal feeding operations that have a large negative impact on water quality in the area. One interesting geologic feature in this region is the Niagara Escarpment, a nearly 1,000-mile-long cliff that runs from Wisconsin to New York. The southeastern portion of the East River watershed, highlighted here, occupies the top of the Niagara Escarpment, while the rest of the watershed occupies the broad floodplain of what is now the Fox River. The East River flows from a high point in the watershed of about 1,000 feet above sea level to a low point of about 550 feet above sea level near the mouth of Green Bay at the Fox River. This change in elevation at the upper portion of the watershed exacerbates some of the environmental impacts I will discuss later in this presentation. The East River is listed on US EPA's Section 303D list of impaired waters due to impairments such as phosphorus and sediment loading and habitat degradation. Additionally, the East River flows into the Fox River, which is an EPA-designated area of concern that is targeted for aggressive reductions in phosphorus and total suspended solids. Because of the aggressive targets associated with the area of concern and its tributaries, there have been a number of planning efforts related to improving water quality in the area. On this slide, you can see just some of the goals that have emerged from these planning efforts. These goals range from watershed-scale flood resiliency to reach-scale stream bank restoration, but all are aimed at improving water quality and reducing overbank flooding. Given the extent of challenges in this watershed and the lofty nutrient and suspended solid reduction goals, a number of restoration options need to be considered. Given the watershed characteristics and the East River's meandering form, research suggests that restoring lateral connectivity could alleviate overbank flooding, reduce streambank erosion and total suspended solids, and help address excess nutrient loading in downstream waters. This is a great initial restoration plan, but how do we determine where to implement these projects to get the most bang for our buck? To help shed some light on where restoration may be most impactful, I performed a watershed analysis using ArcGIS, publicly available datasets, and watershed planning documents. The steps I took are summarized here. To identify areas where restoration projects may have the most impact, I analyzed factors such as streambank erosion, inundation and flooding hotspots, estimated contributors to water quality degradation, land use and ownership, and current and historical wetland extent. Using ArcGIS to compile this wealth of data from a number of different sources, several areas were identified as hotspots. In upper portions of the watershed, down at the bottom of the screen, there is severe streambank erosion and gully erosion coming off of agricultural lands that are commonly unbuffered. These combine to contribute to high levels of suspended solids and nutrients in the East River. Lower, more urbanized portions of the watershed are vulnerable to severe flooding due to loss of historical wetlands and urbanization. Here's an example of a prime location for restoration actions. This area is located near the center of the watershed and receives nutrient-rich flows from agricultural land to the south and suffers from large annual spring floods. As you can see in the top image, this portion of the East River flows through a more urbanized area, but also has substantial riparian buffer along with relict oxbows. This was identified as a priority area for restoration in part because it is an extensive tract of publicly owned land with a recreational trail adjacent to the river. In the image on the right, I've highlighted potential restoration projects on this property. The first recommendation is to restore the disconnected oxbows for use as backwater channels to support floodwaters during high flows. In the spring, this area is routinely flooded by high water, impacting not only the recreational spaces, but adjacent neighborhoods as well. The second recommendation is to remove riprap adjacent to the East River Trail to allow floodwaters to flow into relic channels and floodplains. Removing the culverts under the East River Trail and installing pedestrian bridges would alleviate trail flooding and allow for better flow between the main channel and floodplain channels and improve in-stream habitat and water quality. The next recommendations I made were to manage the open areas surrounding the recreational fields at Weiss Park as wet prairie or possibly wetlands that are intermittently connected to the East River. Properly managing the riparian habitat in this area would add flood protection, native habitat, and aesthetic benefits to the park. Additionally, if some of this area is converted back to wetlands, this site should be explored as a potentially suitable location for northern pike spawning habitat, another priority of regional stakeholders such as the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. To conclude, while the watershed faces a number of challenges that have degraded many aspects of the East River, opportunities to restore this river to its former function and beauty are rife. By applying a watershed analysis approach, regional planners and land managers can identify key areas for restoration projects that will address many of the stressors impacting the East River. By identifying areas where restoration is most impactful and feasible, conservation professionals can implement cost-effective and thoughtful solutions that have the most benefit to restoring the East River. Thank you guys for listening to my presentation.